a family vacation. It's supposed to be about sunlight, laughter, and an escape from everyday life. For the Bradley family, a Caribbean cruise in March of 1998 was meant to be all of that, a celebration on the turquoise waters aboard a floating city of luxury. But just beneath the surface of this perfect picture, something dark was brewing. In the pre-dawn quiet of the Caribbean Sea, their dream vacation would shatter into a nightmare that has now lasted for decades. 23-year-old Amy Lynn Bradley would vanish. The easy explanation, the one the cruise line seemed to prefer, was that she simply fell overboard, a tragic accident. But the evidence, the crew's strange behavior, and the terrifying sightings in the years that followed all point to a truth that is infinitely more sinister. This isn't just the story of a tragic accident. This is the story of how a young woman was allegedly targeted and abducted from a place where she should have been safe, leaving her family to navigate a sea of unanswered questions and the chilling possibility that Amy is still out there, waiting to be found. For the Bradley family, it was the vacation of a lifetime, a sun-drenched Caribbean cruise. But in the early morning hours of March 24th, 1998, their dream turned into a living nightmare. 23-year-old Amy Bradley vanished from the ship without a trace. The official story? She likely fell overboard, but the chilling clues left behind, from cryptic comments to terrifying sightings, paint a far more sinister picture. That Amy may have been targeted and abducted from a floating city with nowhere to run. So, who was Amy Lynn Bradley? Born on May 12, 1974, to her parents, Ron and Iva, Amy was a vibrant and talented young woman. Growing up in Virginia with her younger brother Brad, she was a gifted basketball player who'd earned a full athletic scholarship to Longwood University. She was also a trained lifeguard, a strong, capable swimmer who was completely at home in the water. More than anything, she was fiercely loved by her family. They were a tight-knit group, the kind that genuinely loved spending time together. When Amy graduated with a degree in physical education, her parents wanted to celebrate. Ron, an executive in the insurance industry, had won a trip on a sales incentive program. A 7-day cruise aboard Royal Caribbean's Rhapsody of the Seas. At the time, it was one of the newest, most state-of-the-art vessels on the water. It was the perfect family getaway. The Rhapsody of the Seas wasn't just a ship, it was a floating city. It boasted 11 decks, multiple pools, a casino, a theater, and countless bars and lounges, carrying over 2,400 passengers and a crew of nearly 800. The Bradleys boarded in San Juan, Puerto Rico on Saturday, March 21, 1998, ready for an adventure that would take them to Aruba, Curaçao, and other Caribbean ports. The first few days were postcard perfect. Photos from the trip show a happy, smiling Amy, soaking up the sun with her family. She and her brother Brad, who was 21, were inseparable. But as the festive atmosphere swirled around them, a subtle sense of unease started to creep in. It seemed to center around the ship's house band, a group called Blue Orchid. Certain members of the crew, particularly the band's bassist, Alistair Douglas, a man from Jamaica nicknamed Yellow, seemed to be paying an uncomfortable amount of attention to Amy. Her mother, Iva, later recalled how some of the waitstaff were all over her, making comments she found inappropriate. It created a strange, predatory vibe she couldn't quite shake. The attention was so noticeable that her husband, Ron, even mentioned it, saying the crew seemed to be giving Amy a lot of attention. It was a small flicker of parental concern that, in hindsight, would become a haunting premonition. Monday, March 23rd, was the third night of the cruise. The Rhapsody of the Seas was sailing from Aruba to its next port of call, the island of Curaçao. That evening, there was a big party on the pool deck. The Bradley family was there, enjoying the music and the warm Caribbean air. Amy, dressed for the formal night, was captured on video, laughing and dancing. Later on, she and her brother Brad decided to head to the ship's nightclub. Inside the club, the party was in full swing. Amy and Brad danced and mingled with other passengers. It was here that the attention from Alistair "Yellow" Douglas seemed to ramp up. He was seen on video dancing with Amy, a detail that seemed innocent at the time, but would later become a critical piece of the timeline. As the night wore on, Amy and Brad finally left the club, returning to the family's cabin, number 3064, sometime after 3:30 a.m. Their parents were already asleep. Instead of going straight to bed, Amy and Brad stepped out onto their small private balcony to talk and have a cigarette. It was during this final quiet conversation that Amy told her brother that some of the crew members had made her uncomfortable, especially Yellow. She mentioned he'd even given her his room key and invited her back to his cabin, an offer she'd refused. It was a concerning admission, but in the relaxed post-party haze, it didn't set off major alarm bells. They were on a secure cruise ship, surrounded by thousands of people. What could possibly happen? Around 4:10 a.m., Brad decided to turn in. He told his sister he loved her, words he would later cling to, not knowing they would be his last to her. Amy said she was going to stay out on the balcony for a little while longer to finish her cigarette. She had her cigarettes and a lighter with her, sitting in a lounge chair just feet from the cabin door. An hour or so later, between 5:15 and 5:30 a.m., their father, Ron, stirred. He glanced out onto the balcony and saw Amy, seemingly asleep in the lounge chair. Satisfied she was safe, he drifted back off. It was the last time anyone in her family would ever see her. At approximately 6 a.m., just 30 minutes after seeing her on the balcony, Ron Bradley woke up again. He looked out at the balcony. The lounge chair was empty. Amy was gone. Confusion quickly turned to panic. Ron searched the small cabin. No sign of her. Her sandals were still in the room, but the cigarettes and lighter she'd taken to the balcony were gone. He noticed the balcony door, which he'd seen closed, was now slightly ajar. He checked the bathroom, then stepped out into the quiet pre-dawn hallway, his heart beginning to pound. He walked the length of the deck, calling her name. Nothing. By 6:30 a.m., with the sun rising, full-blown panic had set in. Ron woke his wife and son. Amy's missing. The family immediately began a frantic search, scouring every public space they could, their calls for Amy echoing in the empty halls. Iva knew something was terribly wrong. Amy would never just wander off without telling someone. They immediately reported her missing to the ship's crew, pleading with them to take immediate action. Their requests were logical. Make a ship-wide announcement for Amy and, crucially, do not let passengers get off the ship in Curaçao until she was found. A missing person on a contained vessel is a solvable problem. A missing person in a foreign country is a nightmare. Their pleas were denied. According to the family, the cruise line staff seemed dismissive. They refused to page Amy, saying they didn't want to alarm the other passengers. The ship continued steaming towards port, and as it pulled into the harbor, the gangway was lowered. Thousands of passengers, a river of potential witnesses or even suspects, began to flood into the city. For the Bradleys, it was a moment of pure horror. Their daughter was missing, and any potential crime scene was being irrevocably compromised. It wasn't until 7:50 a.m., after most passengers had already left, that the crew finally made a muted announcement. "Will Amy Bradley please come to the purser's desk?" It yielded nothing. A search of the ship's common areas was eventually done between 12:15 and 1 p.m., hours after she was reported missing, but it turned up no trace of Amy. The search didn't include passenger cabins. To make matters worse, when FBI agents were finally able to board, they discovered the Bradley's cabin had already been cleaned by staff, destroying any potential evidence. The cruise line's official position, as later stated by the cruise director, was that the prevailing assumption was she had fallen or jumped overboard and that the cruise goes on. From the very beginning, there were two completely different theories about what happened to Amy Bradley. This was the explanation favored by the cruise line. The idea was that Amy, perhaps disoriented or having had too much to drink, went to the balcony railing and accidentally fell into the sea. Some even suggested suicide, a notion her family has always rejected, pointing to her happy photos and bright future. But this theory has a lot of problems. Amy was a trained lifeguard and an excellent swimmer. The ship's railings are intentionally high to prevent exactly these kinds of accidents. And boating experts in Curacao have argued that if she had gone overboard there, the currents would have likely carried her body to shore. No trace of her was ever found in the water. To her family, it felt like a convenient explanation that absolved the cruise line of responsibility. This is the theory the Bradley family believes, and it's supported by a disturbing amount of circumstantial evidence. They believe Amy was targeted by crew members, possibly drugged, and smuggled off the ship in Curacao to be sold into sex trafficking. The evidence started accumulating almost immediately. While searching for Amy that first morning, Brad Bradley had a chilling encounter. Around 7:30 a.m., Alistair "Yellow" Douglas, the bassist, approached him and said, "I'm sorry to hear about your sister." This was hours before any general announcement about Amy being missing had been made. How did he know? When questioned, Yellow reportedly became evasive. The FBI did interview him, but his lie detector test was inconclusive, and he was never charged. But it wasn't just Yellow's strange comment. Other passengers came forward with sightings from that morning. 2 women reported seeing a woman they believed was Amy in a ship elevator with Yellow between 5:45 and 6 a.m., the exact time she disappeared. This would place her away from her balcony, alive and with Yellow, making the fell overboard theory even less likely. If Amy was taken off the ship in Curacao, it stands to reason she might have been seen there. Over the years, a series of credible yet unconfirmed sightings have fueled her family's belief that she is still alive. In August of 1998, a Canadian tourist saw a woman who looked strikingly like Amy on a beach in Curacao. She was flanked by 2 men who seemed to be controlling her. He noticed she had the same distinctive tattoos described on Amy's missing person poster: a Tasmanian devil spinning a basketball, a sun on her lower back, a Chinese symbol on her ankle, and a gecko on her navel. He was so sure it was her that he contacted the family. Perhaps the most chilling account came from a U.S. Navy petty officer in 1999. He was at a brothel in Curacao when a woman approached him. She told him her name was Amy Bradley and begged him for help, saying she was being held against her will. Before he could react, 2 men came and took her away. He didn't report it immediately, fearing for his career, but came forward years later, consumed by guilt. The sightings continued. In 2005, a woman named Judy Maurer was in a department store restroom in Barbados. She said she encountered a terrified woman who said her name was Amy and that she was from Virginia, before a group of menacing men returned and hurried her away. These sightings, while never leading to a rescue, paint a consistent and horrifying picture. A woman who looks like Amy, in distress, being controlled by aggressive men. Then, in 2005, the family received an anonymous email. It contained 2 photographs of a lingerie-clad woman from an adult escort website. The woman bore an uncanny resemblance to an older Amy Bradley. The family hired their own forensic expert who concluded that it was highly likely a match. The FBI investigated the lead, but the website's IP address couldn't be traced. The woman was never located, and authorities have never publicly confirmed her identity. For over 2.5 decades, Ron, Iva, and Brad Bradley have lived in a state of perpetual limbo. They have spent their life savings, hired private investigators, and chased down leads across the globe. They've appeared on shows like America's Most Wanted and Dr. Phil, doing anything to keep their daughter's story in the public eye. They maintain a website and a Facebook page, sifting through thousands of tips, enduring cruel hoaxes and scams, all in the faint hope of finding the one real clue. Through it all, their resolve has never wavered. They believe their daughter is alive, and they refuse to give up on her. As her brother Brad has said, If you don't take opportunities and follow leads, you know you've given up on her, and we're not going to do that. So what really happened to Amy Lynn Bradley? How does a person vanish from a floating city, a supposedly secure environment with thousands of potential witnesses? Was the cruise line's initial response just a series of mistakes? Or was it a deliberate effort to manage a public relations crisis at the expense of a missing woman? The family's story, the witness accounts, and the chilling sightings all suggest that for Amy Bradley, the nightmare didn't end in the waters of the Caribbean. It may have just been the beginning. The FBI continues to list Amy Lynn Bradley as a missing person and offers a reward of up to $25,000 for information leading to her recovery. Her case remains open. Amy's family still believes that someone, somewhere, knows the truth, and that even after all these years, there is still hope. The most powerful tool in a cold case like this is public awareness. Keeping Amy's story alive is critical. If you have any information, no matter how insignificant it might seem, please contact your local FBI office or the nearest American embassy or consulate. You can also provide information through the family's official website. For a family that has endured an agony most of us can only imagine, every conversation is a flicker of hope in a long, dark night. They are still waiting for the call that brings their daughter home.